Speaking of Happy presents Frankly Speaking with co-hosts Eli Rigatuso, founder and queer transmasculine two-spirit of the Menominee Nation, and the lovely Avalisa Gallo, model, public speaker, makeup fanatic, and outspoken transgender advocate. Together, we are Frankly Speaking. Woo! Here we are.
Woo! We did it.
Unfreaking believable.
Jeez Louise.
Oh man, I tell you, if there wasn't one curveball after, I mean, look at my face is so red because I'm like stressed out. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, everybody that's joined. We have some viewers on Facebook with us today. We also have some viewers on our, there's 5 people watching on YouTube. So we have people. We have some people, and whoo, it's been a journey. Avalisa and I have been talking about doing this now for how long? Almost 2 months.
It's been about 2 months.
Because we were like, wanted to do something. And then it was, as we were kind of dishing about different things that happen in our daily lives as trans folks. And Avalisa was like, we'll call it Frankly Speaking.
I think so often when we're talking to people, because Eli and I are both educators and, you know, we have conversations with people, there is a censorship that we have to place on ourselves to make sure that we don't evoke too much emotion from the people that we're talking to, or that we don't, you know, upset anyone. And so I felt like we really needed a space where we could lift that censorship.
Yes, let all of our flags fly and let us all just, because that's true. You know, I mean, it's unfortunate, but, you know, given that we do like to make money for what we do, we don't really want to come in guns blazing, so to speak. Right?
You got to get invited back.
We don't want to nail the transphobes to the wall right away. We want to ease them in. We want to be invited back.
Nice.
Yes.
Lots of lube.
So just FYI, this show is taking place at 6 p.m. on a Friday evening, because typically that is kind of when we say we start our weekends anyway, right? And maybe even for some of us before then. I will say this much. There is no tapping down of what's going to happen here. So if you've got young kiddos around and you don't want them to hear F-bombs be dropped, or you don't want them to maybe hear some conversation that might get into some more personal information about each of us, then, you know, maybe put their headphones on with the iPad and something else, SpongeBob SquarePants. Which would be totally fine. But we do not want to keep our amazing guests waiting. We had 2 folks. We had 3 folks lined up, and then one of them disappeared, and the other 2 had other things, unfortunate things, health issues come up, and that's totally cool. We can roll with the punches, right? We can roll with the punches. So I am going to introduce our 2 guests, and then we're going to bring them on screen with you. And here's the thing. Frankly Speaking is really going to be an organic conversation. Avalisa and I are going to toss out some questions and kind of, you know, ask some more about each of our guests that are showing up for us today. They're going to share a little bit about themselves, and we're just going to get into it. And we're going to do this. We're going to have about an hour-long conversation. We're going to see where it takes us. So really, there's a few questions planned, but otherwise, this is completely organic, and it is just us speaking truly from our hearts about what we experience in our daily lives. So first guest, we have Emmy Blanco. Emmy is a 28-year-old transgender woman and lesbian, born and raised in Florida. She moved to Omaha when she was 16 and has been here since. She became aware of her identity at the age of 22. fully aware of her identity at 22, but noticed signs of her identity post hoc going back to early childhood. She's fairly early in transition, which was delayed for almost 6 years due to constraints from societal pressure and financial barriers. She's now a therapist and the marketing and operations manager at Psychological Healing Insights, PC, a private practice in Omaha, Nebraska, dedicated to serving underserved populations. She primarily works with the LGBTQIA2S plus clients and has passion for trans and queer liberation, decolonization, anti-racist work, and leftist anti-capitalist efforts outside of her role as a clinician. When she's not hard at work, Emmy enjoys walks on the beach, cry laughing, and laugh crying, and terrible transphobic pundits. At terrible transphobic pundits. Playing Pokemon, cuddling with her noodle horse, aka her greyhound, cooking over-the-top hot cuisine. I'm sure I did not pronounce that. Like, you know, fancy foods. We'll just say fancy foods. And I've tasted some of those fancy foods. That is not a lie. And literally doing anything in nature. So that's our first guest, Emmy. And then we have Julia Cheval. Julia is our pinch hitter. Last minute, like literally 45 minutes ago, she said, I'm in, count me in. She is a historian of Central Asia. She has a master's degree from the George Washington University, 2020 in Central Asian history. She's published articles and blogs on Afghan social and political history, CVE, and transgender history. She's currently a research analyst at the United States Institute of Peace, supporting the Afghanistan and Religion and Inclusive Societies programs, and works as a freelance writer and editor. Whew, gotta take a breath. At USIP, she is currently leading a push for GSM inclusive programming in peace work. And she's going to explain a little bit more with us about what GSM is all about. But we are bringing in our people.
Welcome, welcome.
Hi, hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Again, like I said, this was a last minute, pinch hitters that said, yes, we're in, count us in. So thank you so much for being here. I would love to just, start off the show with Avalisa. If you want to just go ahead and kind of kick off with maybe just a softball lob question to each of our guests.
Okay. So I will open this up to both of you because I found that this question hits people a little differently. So we recently just had the Trans Day of Visibility. And for some, that is a day to celebrate our existence, celebrate our visibility, and show that we are not in the same place that we used to be. Really amazing thing. For other people, it is a chance for their friends and family to publicly out them and use them as a crutch to say, hey, I know trans people. So how do each of you feel about Trans Day of Visibility, and how has it affected you this year?
Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started. So honestly, what's been the most challenging aspect of TDOV for me is the fact that it really lacks that lens of intersectionality, especially kind of like how it goes with specifically like brown trans women and black trans women. And I'm glad that like a lot of recent efforts have really started to like move in that direction, but it still hasn't quite gotten to where I would like it to be, as well as kind of also having this understanding as to those people who can't really be out and proud and loud and themselves due to safety concerns.
I think that there's a really big miss on the fact that there are so many people that cannot be visible and people that can't get to the place where their visibility is able to be celebrated. And I think that's, one of the things that we are missing with TDOV. And I think just kind of in the trans community in general, I really want to be to a place where we're able to recognize the struggles that people face when it comes to transitioning, because I know a lot of times, and even for myself, I thought, well, I did it, shit. And, that's not the right way to think, because everybody is a different person and they experience things differently.
Julia, what do you think?
Yeah, I can add my thoughts on this. So I have maybe the other kind of perspective on this, which is like when TDOV comes around for me, it's like a bunch of cis people putting like all these wonderful like trans positive messages on their Instagram, and it's like, okay, cool, thanks, babes. But like the amount to like that translates into anything more is questionable. Um but I also speak from like a relative position of privilege. So like for me, I have like the luxury of being disinterested in TDOV and not necessarily maybe participating as much. So I don't know. I have complicated feelings about the day. Like I think one of the odd things is that like there are a lot of like trans people for whom like visibility is not necessarily a thing they want. Like I feel like whether or not you really like want to be like cis passing and very fishy, like or whether you like do not necessarily desire that or aren't interested in pursuing that, and you're like non-binary and very out and proud with that, like I guess I just wonder like what does visibility matter to us? Like I'm not sure. Like when I was in early transition and I was very like clearly trans, like I didn't want to be visible. I didn't want to like deal with that. And one day of visibility was like, yeah, okay, that's kind of nice, but I'm already dealing with too much visibility, you know? Like I just want to be accepted. And not hurt regardless of what I look like. And so I don't know, like I feel like it's kind of weird because we have like Trans Day of Remembrance, right? And like we respond to that with a happy holiday that's visibility, you know? I feel like maybe instead of remembrance, we should have a day for like celebration or like, you know, good memories or good things. And I just feel like visibility is a really weird holiday or day to design in reaction to like Trans Day of Remembrance. So I don't know. I just feel like it's such a loaded and complex term. And there's so many different experiences that, you know, like I feel like I honestly feel more different from other trans people on TDOV than I feel like closer. And what I want out of TDOV is to feel closer, you know, to people like me. I don't want to feel separate. Like TDOR is kind of cool because you do get to feel closer and you do have events that bring you together. But TDOV, I don't know, I didn't feel closer at all because visibility is such a complex question.
Yeah, you know, I think I totally hear what you're saying. And I also, like, for me, when I think of visibility, I think of, wow, what a difference would it have made back in the early 70s when I first knew about, like, had any sort of indication that I might not be cisgender. I just didn't have the language for it. And if there were other people that I could see that were like me, and more conversation going on around that. But I think it's a daily thing. I think one single big hoopla day doesn't necessarily answer all of the deep rooted complex problems that we face on a daily basis. And I agree with you. Like, another reason why Avalisa and I wanted to start doing this show was so that we could literally have conversations and real tough conversations to a certain degree with other transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming folks, and then also be educating other people that are watching along, because we do it pretty much every day. And again, it's like it's part of our active existence. And I transitioned late in life. I get misgendered on the daily still, even from people who should know better. And so for me, it's like I can appreciate the folks who are showing some sort of solidarity. Cis folks still need to learn how to kind of step aside, though, especially if they're in spaces where there are already trans people. You know, that's when they should be saying, I don't know, maybe we should ask the trans person in the room and not like act like they're not here, because sometimes that happens.
Julia said something really interesting about performative allyship. And I'd love to let this be a thing that we all talk about, because I am extremely tired of performative allyship. It seems so fucking stupid to me. Like you could just be quiet. You could just not say anything and, you know, and drive in that lane. But instead you have people doing these really small and insignificant things. And while, you know, appreciate you standing up and all of that other stuff, it's still like, what are you actually doing? What are you prepared to actually do? Or are you just going to, it's like the whole Black Lives Matter thing when a whole bunch of people posted like Black profile pictures. Okay, did you link any charities, any funds, any way of actually helping? Or are you just doing this to be performative? And I think so many people, their allyship to the trans community is just purely performative. And that gets my gizzard.
Yeah, you know, we have Riley made a comment here. My friends and I used to joke that on TDOV, that was the day cis people could see us, but the day to follow, we are back to being invisible. And while we laughed, it's kind of true. Like a whole 24 hours to celebrate that we are allies to trans folks, and then the next day, it's like we don't even matter again.
Exactly.
And I cannot agree with that enough, because I think that, you know, like I say this, like, okay, great. Thanks for posting about how trans people deserve to have health care. But does the company that you work at actually extend that health care? Have you asked that question of them? Or are you just posting this on your page because you want everybody else to do it, right? So that's the other piece of we need you to actually make these efforts. Emmy, you're being so quiet. It's kind of surprising.
Well, I'm just really trying to figure out like how I'm going to formulate my response, because the fact of the matter is that there's like just so many thoughts that I have on this. And I think that like one of the, I guess we'll like springboard this into there, is this whole element of, and again, just kind of like my unique perspective as a mental health professional. I had posted on my social media, which is like pretty much all therapists, about how like emotional labor is just consistently over and over again devalued, right? Talking about how like terrible pay is for a lot of therapists in Omaha nonprofits. And of course, everybody kind of jumped on that. They were like, hell yeah, yes, all of that, right? Because, you know, it affects them. But then literally the next day on TDOV, I'm like, all right, I've literally been giving all of you this very free education on transness, both like in my master's program and on social media, and also like just on one-on-one conversations. And I had a whopping 0 people contribute to my Venmo or my PayPal, which speaks volumes as to how much they devalue emotional labor and how much they devalue my own existence and trans people as a whole. Because at the end of the day, we're just used as a prop to really like push forward their perception of being like progressive. I'm a cool therapist, right? Like I'm one of the therapists that gets it, but then they don't actually do anything with it. They're not out there actually contributing to anything like that. And then when it comes down to, all right, it's time to have a trans client. Oh, I'm just going to refer out. Or I'm going to go ahead and consult and have somebody else tell me exactly what I'm doing, as opposed to actually educating themselves on the subject and actually speaking to a real, actual trans person.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say to add on this is I think that like we need to be aware that like in any kind of, you know, movement or push for anything, like if we want to bring people in, we've got to have like a way we can show them to do more, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not the fault of like your average like kind of like disinterested in politics person that like is okay with like Black Lives Matter and like trans lives and like protecting trans people to like when they post like something on Instagram, they have been taught and they believe that they might be taking action. Mm-hmm. Right? Because like honestly, frankly speaking, the kind of things that like actually get the goods, like direct action and like labor organizing and having like a political party and people in political office, like that is a thing that like frankly like has been absent from the conversation for a pretty long time, which is like in order to make change, you have to have power and you have to be willing and comfortable to exercise political power. You have to be willing to threaten your enemies. You have to be aware there are enemies who want to hurt you and fight you. You know, and like, I honestly feel like some part of this is like some people are just like trying to be like the cool person and like use us to like, you know, improve their own look or like definitely like co-opt like transness in so far as like they're like cisgender people making this post to like look better. But I also think that part of it is like a lot of people like do not have a tactical or strategic view of these questions simply because like on a lot of these issues they're on the outside, right? Like we're on the inside. We are dealing with this every day, and we have a lot more of an incentive and an interest to think about fighting. And we know who the people that we need to change their minds are. We know generally who the people with power are. Like we have the like ironic benefit of like being people who suffer from this to like have an awareness of like what we could do to make this better. And we talk to a lot of other people who are interested in making this better. And so like, I'm not saying like performative allyship doesn't happen, you know, it does. And it's bad and it's dumb and stupid and I hate it. But like at the same time, like, I don't know, like, I feel like whenever we build a movement, whenever we do anything, we have to have like in our hearts, like love and empathy for the people we need to bring onto our team, you know, and we're meeting people where they're at. And for a lot of people, where they're at is like 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. We know what they would call us or what they would think. And we need to bring them onto our team knowing that.
Let's be honest, though. Those names and those things that they call us are not, those things are still happening today. Yeah. So that's the other piece of it that I think, you know, and I do not at all disagree with what you just said, because it's true. And I get it. And this is why Avalisa and I do the education and go out and speak to organizations and companies, and they hire us to come in and have these conversations because we get it. I can meet them exactly where they're at. And I can also call a spade when I know someone actually is not genuinely wanting to learn. And so it's like, how do we start to bridge some of these gaps of, you know, I'm Indigenous. And so there's a part of me that's like, look, I'm only going to give those people who are still stuck in colonized ways so many mulligans. And then I'm going to have to turn on the heat because I almost got fired. I came out in 2015 at the tender age of 50. And within that first 2.5, 3 years, I went through hell with my company, hell. And so it's just like, you know, I get the, hey, let's kind of be careful of their feelings. But the other part of it is nobody was really that careful with mine. Even the folks that I reach out to who were actually set up to help people like me who were struggling after they came out. And so it's just like, how do we bridge those gaps where, you know, I have trans folks reaching out to me, private messaging me, text messaging me, their family members and friends reaching out to me and saying, my person that I care about needs help. And I'll drop everything and help. And especially a trans person or someone who's connected to a trans person. But it's like, how do we bridge the gaps like within our community and create those stronger bonds? Because, you know, even myself and Avalisa have had folks come at us when we've asked very simple questions, genuinely wanting to get some information about stuff. So I mean, yeah. Here's another comment from a viewer.
I was gonna hit that one. Change starts with small steps. So what we may see as non-supportive could be the starting point to something bigger. How do you know when a small step is not a performance? You know when a small step is not performance when that person is willing to stand up for whatever they're standing up for in this small post or in this profile picture. If they're able to stand up for it in real life, then that's not just performative. But I think there are so many things that are performative that fall into this, you know, into allyship. I think my bigger problem is with people automatically claiming that they are allies of the trans community when in fact somebody will call us a tranny right in front of them or say that we are still men or we're still women or we're just confused and all of this other stuff. And they will sit by silently, but they'll change their picture to a trans flag on Trans Day of Visibility or Trans Day of Remembrance. That's extremely performative. And that's the shit that I don't have time for. But I think it's also really important to make sure that we are encouraging our allies. And I think I honestly don't have the plan because the trans community is such a vast collection of experiences. For trans women who follow the binary, I can help you figure shit out for that. I can really help you figure some shit out for that. But for a non-binary feminine leaning person, I don't know that experience. I don't know how to tell you to be a better ally. And I think that is going to come from, the trans community actually having conversations like these and getting to know each other's experiences, because at the end of the day, I do not know what a non-binary person goes through. I just don't. And so I do my best not to speak on it. I do my best not to speak for them, not to say, oh, they need this, they need that. This is the experience that they're going through. When I am anywhere public, I say, me as a trans woman, me as a Black trans woman, me as this Black trans woman. I am not the Lorax. I do not speak for all of the trans people, but I can speak for me. And there are a lot of people, trans women, who are going through similar things that I am. But I think it's really hard to hand over the list to allies of, here's exactly how you can help, when that it's so big.
Well, and I also think that to a certain degree, there's a separation of folks in the community being allies and folks out of the community being allies. Like, I think intrinsically, those of us in the community do our best to be supportive. But I also know that there are folks, when I first came out as trans, I made some errors. I said some things, I did some things that I'm not proud of, that I misgendered folks. It took me a hot minute to get used to they, them pronouns. I knew I wanted to be respectful of my non-binary friends, but also just, realizing that I had to deprogram myself first. And so I think it's important to realize that. Micah brought up another really great comment here, especially the intersectionality between the communities, including disability community. How do we build those connections within a large part of the disability and rare disease community is if they're transphobic? Oh my gosh, like that is a whole show in and of itself. And Micah, I'm going to get in touch with you and we'll bring you on because I know that you have gone through a lot. Like, we could seriously do a whole series on what Micah has gone through. I also wanted to just circle back up here to a comment that Riley made that, totally, I do so many volunteer workshops and lectures because I want to help people learn, even though some days it's really exhausting. After 3 years of doing this, I've just started asking for a fee. Riley, I'm so glad that you are asking for a fee. Do not do that stuff.
You should.
Don't do that emotional labor for free. And that's another thing, as a community, we all have to come together and say, if you're willing to take it for free, that's on you. If you are not, then you're kind of actually perpetuating the same thing. One of the things that I teach a lot of nonprofits that I work with is, look, even if it's to give somebody $30 for an hour-long panel is better than nothing, because you're asking them to share their emotional labor in their lives and their own personal narratives. And I think that it's important to compensate folks for that, because nonprofits kind of set up this whole thing of, well, we need volunteers. Well, I'm not tolding my story.
I think it's this really weird thing where cis people expect us, their desire to educate themselves or their desire to learn is more important than our emotional labor. And I think that they take it out of the category of emotional labor because it's somewhere in between education and emotional labor. And it's like, you're not going to go up to a stranger and be like, hey, tell me about your rape. Walk me through that. What was that like? How has that changed you? Like, if you really do want to be educated and that's what you need in order to be educated, I would pay that person. Go ahead.
Dan, you're so quiet.
Well, you're also asking an autistic person to figure out when I can even actually talk.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm glad I'm calling on you.
Yep. But that said, I think that the other element too is just also like kind of understanding, right? Like, and like this is something that I tell my clients all the time. And it sucks, but it's like one of those realities, right? Of the kind of how we have to deal with it. And it's knowing that, of course, like anger is a very valid emotion, right? It is absolutely valid because anger is an underlying emotion plus blame. So that, for example, it's like feeling hurt, right? Or feeling betrayed. Some degree of that, some degree of feeling like you've been mistreated. And the other aspect of that is, again, that blame, where we have somebody or something or some system to blame, right? And so the distinction between like valid anger and invalid anger, right, is if the blame is placed where it belongs and the emotion itself makes some degree of sense, right? Like, I'm not going to feel hurt because somebody is just existing, right, and just doing their own thing, but I will feel hurt if they do something against me specifically, intentionally or unintentionally. And there's the element of blame, right, which again is fully valid if that person truly is to blame. And then the other element of that too is that we could communicate that anger. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And I am fully supportive of that because there's moments where we're human, right? And it just comes out that way, especially in the heat of that moment. And that's where it's important to not tone police, right? Because we know that we're all human. It's going to come out. It's the natural consequence of hurt plus blame. And so when we are able to, right, but this isn't for anybody else to police but yourself, to yourself, right, then it is absolutely imperative that we use vulnerability as opposed to anger, right, where we, instead of expressing the anger itself, we express the emotion that the anger is coming from. Let's express that hurt. I want to tell you how you hurt me. And I have a really strong dialectical behavioral therapy leaning. And it shows because one of the strategies that I use the most is called Dear Man. And I'll just briefly kind of run through it. It's describe, right? So you just describe the facts as to what happened. So like, you called me sir, right? For example. Express, it made me feel X, Y, Z type of way. Oh.
You knew that was going to happen eventually.
Okay.
Yeah, you're kind of cutting out, Emmy.
Do you want to throw Emmy backstage and then bring her back out?
Oh, here she is.
Okay. Where did I cut out?
Express.
Okay. So you express just how you're feeling about things, about that situation. So again, let me spell it out. Some people are not very with as far as kind of understanding emotional aspect of things. Assert, right, so there's the A, what we need.
Yeah, it's now cutting. I don't know.
This is annoying.
I know. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm gonna bring you out for a second.
So, I felt like you had something to say, and I think this would be the perfect time.
Yeah,
I have one point. I wanted to add what you were saying, Evelise. So, like, I guess I would suggest one thing, which is like, we're not just doing emotional labor. Like, this is real work. This is work. We are working. This is labor. And I just say that because, like, I feel like emotional labor, it captures something like very specific. But I also believe like sometimes we undersell ourselves by describing what is work, what is labor, which is like a thing that we're doing, which is labor, as valid as like the labor of a professor, as valid as like the labor of like an analyst like me. We like undersell ourselves. Like, I work in Washington, D.C. I'm a private contractor, and like I have to like hustle constantly for contracts. And like one of the things that I do is like gender and sexual minorities and like LGBTQI issues and like what we can do with that in a peace building space, right? And well, sometimes that might include like an emotive element to it, a personal element to it. Like it's labor, it works. Like it is a thing we have to do. And both of you today, like holding this is work. And so I guess I just feel like emotional labor is a good concept, but I also feel like, I don't know, like we are working right now because we are like working in a personal sense. For like a goal that we want, but we're also just like doing actual like real work. And like, I don't know, like I sometimes just feel like the emotive element, like even is the thing that like people like are paying us for essentially because it's part of like the consulting process, you know?
And I also, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your statement. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that like, you know, I think the term emotional labor is like good. I think it captures a very specific thing, but I think that like, we also just need to like, you know, like call a spade a spade. Like this is labor. This is work.
This is full labor.
And actually, I really love that. Yep. I really love that. And I also want to just, because one of the things that I see happen when people do call it emotional labor is people will then say, well, then why are you doing this? Yeah. Well, then why do they do? Well, we don't want to put that labor on them. And, you know, God forbid we compensate them or think we have to compensate them. So we'll have somebody else train. We'll have a cis person do the training. It's not labor for them. It's like, no, actually it is labor because you're still paying them. And in many cases, they do still get it wrong. Yeah. And so, yes, I like that. I love just labor. It's labor.
Just labor.
I always call it a labor of love, though. Like this, frankly speaking, and speaking of happy, is a labor of love. But labor, yes, labor first. Emmy, do you want to try to finish your statement and see if we can get the rest of that without you breaking up on us?
Sure. I am definitely going to file a complaint with my former employer sometime soon. But that said, I'll briefly just run through it because I blabbed on enough anyway. Kind of the other problem as to why I also just avoid even piping up is because you start me, I won't stop. But again, so you express what you feel from that thing you just described. I'm literally just going to run through it. Express what you feel from what you described. You assert what you need exactly. So stop calling me that. Then you reinforce, thank you for calling me not sir. Right? And then you keep three things in mind. You're mindful of your own emotions. You appear confident, even if you're not. And then last but not least, you negotiate with your wants, but never your needs.
I like that.
Yes.
I think communication is extremely important. And I think following Dear Man when you feel anger and digging down to the actual emotion, the root of it is extremely important in using Dear Man. If you could explain it again, would be amazing to put into my everyday life.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Just run through the letters again so that I knock them in real good.
Okay, so describe, express, assert, reinforce, mindfulness, appear confident, and negotiate.
All right. See, I'm glad you came back for that twice. It's awesome.
For sure. And I was going to say, too, that I oftentimes use that with like my trans clients when there's like an unsupportive family member. And I even have used it myself, right? In like these difficult conversations I've had with family where it's like, you know what, in the moment, yeah, it'll be a very human reaction of getting mad and like, you just kind of be like, you fucking bitch. Like, just don't call me that, right? And sometimes it comes out, but then it's like, okay, but I'm going to take a moment to compose myself. It's like, I got that out because like, honestly, like still fuck you. Right. But fuck you because, and then I'll go ahead and write that down. Right. Or I'll say it out loud. And I like 110% am all for writing like letters. If you can't like express that calmly in like vivo, right. Like doing it like in person. Because yeah, it's fucking hard. And that's where people also kind of need to understand that, like when they're trying to tone police us, like, oh, you could be friendlier. Yeah, try being friendly when this is literally like us day in and day out. Like, again, at the same time, Yes, anger absolutely fosters disconnection, right? It pushes people away. But it also spurs you into action. So it actually has something good behind it. But vulnerability, which is where we share that underlying emotion, that brings us closer together.
Yeah.
So why not? And that's why I love the fact that we're having this space, because this is all about that vulnerability. This is about this is the space to really communicate, like, hey, you know what? This is the shit that pisses me off, but this is why.
Yeah. Yeah. You
So
know, I was
I want to
actually
say
going to just,
something.
oh, go ahead. I'll let you go.
Oh, I was going to say something, and then that was going to lead into the comment that's coming. Fuck the state of Arkansas. They are passing legislation that healthcare professionals, healthcare providers can, they have the right to deny care to trans patients. And I think they're going as far as hitting it with the whole LGBTQIA 2S+ community. They said, fuck you to our entire community. So here's one back.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Michaela made a comment here about transphobic laws have newly popped up all over the country, and they have, like, many states trying to pass laws and legislation against us, anti-trans legislation. Also, just here in Nebraska, the Board of Education is trying to pass more inclusive standards, and there's been a majority of pushback, and they're asking if we have any thoughts on that. I have 100 million thoughts on that. I could only watch a little bit of that testimony today because I honestly, I needed to protect my peace because I wanted to be able to be on for this. As both Avalisa and Emmy know, it's been a really shitty year for me. And so I'm literally on the verge of tears, probably 99.9% of the time with everything that I have experienced. And so watching some of that testimony today, I just wanted to, like, scream my head off because of some of the things that these folks were saying. And this woman stands up and she's reading testimony that her children wanted her to share because they couldn't be here because they live in another state. And I'm like, then it doesn't apply to them. And then some of the comments that she was making kind of led me to thinking about one of the first questions that we had on here, like the biggest misconceptions you've heard with your own ears about what it is to be transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming or gender diverse. And that's what I was hearing. Like in the 3 testimonies that I heard, that's exactly what I heard. Is all of the lies about who we are, you know, that we are just deviants, that we are out to ruin people, or we're tricking people, or like all of those things that are just like, look, I'm just trying to live my life, pay my bills, and keep the lights on, right? And be able to eat and feed myself, and to be able to take care of, again, the massive numbers of trans folks who I see whose healthcare isn't providing coverage for their top surgeries. And so I see their GoFundMes all the time, and it breaks my heart because I can't give to every single one of them. And so, you know, it's like, yes, we do need that. We do need to have that passed. And I appreciate that person sharing that comment, because it is true that, you know, it's all backwards, and we still live here in the Midwest where it is way backwards. You know, and a lot of these people that testified that I heard weren't even sharing facts, like truth. It was all just lies. They even brought up a book that I can't even remember the name of the woman who wrote it, but it just came out this past November. And thankfully Amazon said, no, we're not going to let that crap fly because it's a bunch of lies and based on somebody's opinion. But about this rapid onset gender dysphoria. I mean, angry. Julia, you have something to say about that.
I have so many like opinions. I mean, like the United States of America is like, frankly, like, yeah, if you're like a trans woman, your life is gonna suck here. And then in the United Kingdom, for some reason, it's just like if you're like a trans man, like, you're not saying, you know, trans men in the US don't have struggles, but like the main thing you focus on in like the media in the UK is like trans men, and there's a variety of historical reasons for that. I just like the rapid onset gender dysphoria thing is like one of them. It is so like, I think it's almost like interesting in some way, like, not saying it's not evil. It is evil. It just like reminds me of like old historical records I can find from like 1912 of like a Freudian psychiatrist saying that like someone who was clearly like a transgender woman is like an inverted homosexual and has like psychic inversion due to the way their mom treated them. And like, the thing is, like, pop culture psychology and pop culture beliefs about like us especially have like never gone away, and they've never been changed. And so like I saw that book and I know exactly what book you're talking about. I have no capacity to remember whatsoever what the title is.
We don't need to
Read that book.
We don't need to about it. But it's just like,
I know the title unfortunately.
Anyway, go ahead, Julia.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So anyway, the whole point I want to make is like, I think we can find some solace in the fact that none of this is actually about us. What I mean by that is like when people in the United Kingdom, for example, write books saying that we have this thing we call rapid onset gender dysphoria and it's hurting our little girls, right? Is what they would call like trans men. What they're really doing is writing books that are like reinforcing like the patriarchal concept that we need to defend women, right? And so it's really like about cisgender people and their anxieties and their issues and the way that like because of their own anxieties and fears, they as cis people have to put things onto us because we are one of the only mirrors they have for these kind of questions. Like if you think about it, the cisgender world is actually like barren and dead and like absent of any space for like really thoughtful gender reflection or thinking about masculinity or femininity. It's just not really a part of like the vast majority of cis people's lives. And like we had to invent the term transgender, right? One of the things I argue for is that we also had to invent the concept of cisgender identity, right? Like these things were invented. They were made by human beings for specific purposes in the same way like the buildings we inhabit were made by human beings for specific purposes. Like they're as like constructed as like the bricks and mortar that surround us, right? And so what I mean is like when people do this, we're not doing anything wrong. Of course we're not. But at the same time, when people who you know, are cisgender primarily are doing this, it's really about like their own anxieties that might not really have a lot to do with us, you know, like definitely like a lot of the hatred for like trans people, I think is actually related to a lot of underlying issues in a lot of different directions and a lot of different animuses in different ways that have simply picked us as like the target to hurt right now, you know, like a child lashing out and capable of figuring out why it's afraid. And like, I find hope in that because like I firmly believe like if we deal with those more like underlying issues, we can make a lot more progress because I don't think it's realistic to think we can get every single person who like hates and despises us to think, you know, trans women are women, trans men are men. I don't think that's a realistic strategic goal. What I do think is a realistic strategic goal is for us to partner with other groups and organizations to fight for changes to our political, economic system, our social like services to make life better for more people, you know, to alleviate some of the stresses of daily life that I think honestly drive people crazy wacko bananas and make them go online all day and like watch QAnon and go read the gender dysphoria book. Like literally like we have in the United States and honestly in the UK too, insane countries, and we are equally as insane as one another because we're like the only first world nations that like have, you know, like healthcare systems that we're either trying to privatize in the case of the UK with the NHS and just like totally ruin, or in the United States it's pretty much like a healthcare system where like if you're sick, like your medicine is like a 6-pack of like Mike's Hard Lemonade. Like it's just stupid. And so like I don't know, I just feel even when I see this, I almost have no hatred for the people doing it. You know, I have hatred for the people with actual real political power, like, you know, the upper echelons of society who've created a system where old boomers, instead of like thinking about climate change or globalization or like the economic and social forces the size of history, that have transformed their lives, like instead focusing on us as like the scapegoat for every single problem. Like I feel like that's one thing we can find strength in. Like, it's not about us. We're not doing anything wrong. We're fine. We're good, in fact. This is about the personal, like, psychic instability of cisgender people who have their own issues that they're not dealing with, you know?
Well, yeah, and that's the, you know, the other piece of that is understanding that, you know, we all have traumas to heal. And I think we as transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming or gender diverse folks, I think we actually do a lot of that work. It's just built into us as part of our transitioning. And many of, I know so many brilliant, I have met so many brilliant transgender folks doing amazing things, becoming doctors, becoming therapists, becoming psychologists, becoming attorneys, and going out and running for political office. And so, like, I just think that's like, it's amazing. And so we just need to keep paving the way for them to be able to get into those places. I love this. So here's a comment from Joyce. If we can shrink the patriarchy and control the Christian views, we all LGBTQIA can continue to grow. Just from an older lesbian who loves all your fight and feelings. We're all in this together. Yes, Joyce, we are. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this is from Mr. Gerardo. Instability of cisgender people. Look in the mirror. There's nothing stable about. Oh, I see. We already got a blocker.
That's where I was getting my giggle earlier. I saw it come in, and it just tickled the shit out of me.
Bye-bye, Mr. Gerardo. Bye-bye.
Allow me to say, as the absolute scourge of the cisgender folks, where not only am I a trans woman, I'm brown, I'm a lesbian, I'm in your fucking bathroom, cisgender women. Fight me. And I'm out here turning your fucking frogs gay. I don't care. But, like, it's just funny how it's like, not only are we vilified for that, but like I'm also like double vilified because if you actually like have looked at any of those like snippets from good old fucking Abigail Schreier and her stupid fucking book, like one of the villains of the story is the internet, the other one is the therapist. The therapists are just turning all these kids trans just for some nefarious purpose. And you know what? I'm out here and I'm going to turn all your kids trans. God damn it.
If it was that goddamn easy, don't you think we would turn back?
Right.
Yeah, that would be a lot fucking easier.
There's this thing with Lil Nas X's video, and they're saying that the gay agenda, the transit, what the fuck is that? Why did I not get the email?
Do I need to update 4 minutes before the end of the show? You got to bring this up. That's a whole.
Wait. Do I need to update my mailing address so that I can get the trans agenda and the queer agenda sent to me? Because I'm not getting it. Am I out of the loop somewhere?
I just like love
I missed out. I was supposed to send it to you, but I forgot.
Okay.
I just like love the idea that, like, I mean, like I said earlier, we haven't had like conversations about power in a really long time, and we haven't. And like I said, like we have all these like cisgender folks who have a lot of problems, right, in our society, and like. I honestly believe like people thinking that Lil Nas's video is going to turn them homosexual or like turn their kids gay. It's literally like, frankly, liberals, conservatives have been a huge part of this because they both fed into the culture war thing. I'm not like saying I'm not saying that like liberals are evil. I'm just like a Bernie voter and I like Bernie. I don't care about anything else. And the point is like literally like you know, like we live, like I said, insane country. And like the idea that like, you know, the Lil Nas's video will like turn your kids gay because he grinds on the devil is like as fundamentally valid as the idea that like you're going to make trans equality happen by posting like a trans flag on your Instagram. They're the same idea. Through the consumption of content, we can produce a different world, because to people who have no ability to comprehend political conflict, political struggle. The consumption of content is the only way that you make things different. So when you see people possibly consuming content that you think is satanic, you know, it's pretty logical to think that. Like, I'm not saying it's like true. But what I'm saying is like, it's an insane thing to think, but it's as rational as like the performative allyship of people on Instagram. And that's the thing that I'm interested in changing. And I think we need to think about changing, which is it's not just about what people think about us. It's about how people think about politics that really needs to change. Because if we can change that, I think our fortunes will be a lot better, as will everyone else's fortunes. You know, like we have to really think about transforming like how we have learned to think about our role in this society and like our like the things that we're allowed to do and the things that we want from our country and our government and the things we want our government to do. Yep. Like I really think that's a huge part of this. And like we can work as long as we want, as much as we want all day long, but like the movement for like trans rights and for like our protection like is not going to get anywhere. So as long as like the fundamental message in our country is through consumption of like content or through showing whatever you consume, that's like what you can like stand for, or that's what you're going to make the world. Like that's not a realistic political vision. And so I just feel like that's something that I'm interested in. And I think that like for every single group, whether it's like the George Floyd protests and like BLM, or people concerned about like immigrants' rights and like kids in cages, or like trans women, like and trans men, non-binary people, like we all have the same enemy and interests. But once again, if we don't get the people who post the things on their Instagram to start thinking about politics and their relationship to politics differently, none of us will ever get anywhere, no matter how much we just debunk or tell truths or talk. Sorry if that was like going on for a while.
No. But
because you finally said what the minority agenda is. That's what the agenda is. We need to politicize. We need to get people to understand that there's so much more that they can do. And I think actually fighting against the way that politics work and the way that we see politics is a really good way to start.
Yeah, I agree 100% wholeheartedly. And I think that there's a manner to which, like, I would say this: if you're a keyboard warrior and you are a trans ally and you have the bandwidth to take someone on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, more power to you. Do it all day long, because it takes that work off me. Because when I am out there doing things and having to take on people who show up like Mr. Gerardo, I think it's important that like you taking that off of my plate is amazing. Like I would let cis folks do that all day, as long as they're coming to me and asking me certain, and saying, look, can you answer a question for me really quick, just so I make sure that I'm sharing exactly what I should be sharing? And I've got this darn sun setting and it's getting in my eyes, in my face. How about that?
Something someone said, I don't remember where it was. I think it was during the BLM protest. There was a white man who said, "I am here so that you can fight with my hands." And I absolutely love that. I feel like that's what an ally is. You offer your hands, but you don't just fight. I'm going to fight using your hands. You don't represent me. You don't speak for me. You're just there. And I feel like that's what allyship is. And him saying that was absolutely beautiful to me. I could be wrong. I could be an idiot for that, but he said it, and I was like, "Yes, white man, you better. That's how you support me."
I think that's
absolutely
beautiful. Like, I mean, like, sorry to like reiterate it, but like that's like I'm actually a little optimistic, because I think like we saw a lot of that, and I think a lot of people are like beginning to think of politics like that, because like we're in this moment right now where we've been talking about the same issues for so long that like it's clear that none of the things that we've done for a really long time work. And like even like I don't know, I just think that's beautiful, and that's really cool. And I think that the fact that people who are just like you know, just like maybe your regular average, like older cis het white guy are beginning to think like that. Like that's one of the things we need to change. That's one of the things we need to encourage. And like that's humane. That's like honestly good. And like regardless of like any of his other like opinions necessarily or his past, like if someone is willing to give me that, you know, that's what I think we need is like the clay to build something better. We don't need like a perfect moral life. We don't need them to always have posted perfect things. Sure. We don't need them to have perfect opinions. We need them to like give us their hands to fight. That's what we need. And I think a lot of people can do that and are willing to do that. So like, just thank you for sharing. That was really, really like humane and inspiring.
Absolutely. I love it too. I think, you know, the other thing is that like I say a lot of things, but I'm always here for an ally who's got questions, and I never turn them away. I don't really turn anyone away, if I'm being totally honest. And I'll have conversations even with that person who shows up and starts to say things that I'm kind of going, okay, you know what? You're heading down the wrong path here. You know, I had a guy, I've known this guy since grade school. And he shows up in my DMs and he shares about his niece, who is now his nephew, but he keeps calling her the niece. And I said, okay, you just told me that your nephew is a trans boy, and has asked you to use male pronouns. Why do you keep referring to him with the wrong pronouns? And he just went off on me. And I said, look, I'm willing to have this conversation with you, but I just need to kind of find some common ground. Well, what ended up happening is I discovered his sister shut him out because he was being such an incredible toxic jerk. And I said to him, I go, I will keep talking to you if you honestly want to get to a point where you can understand what is going on with your sister and your nephew. And I can help get you up to speed, but not if you're going to continue to push back and say it's wrong and God says it's wrong. Because I'm even telling you, I'm about ready to block you too.
You can get the fuck out.
Yeah. So we have Joyce said, please share each person in this chat's contacts if you're comfortable so I can follow on social media. I will be your voice. Joyce, thank you so much. We appreciate that. So here we are at 7:06. So we were going to have an hour-long show, and it's about an hour. It's been about an hour. I would love to have any final thoughts. If any of you would like to take and give us any final thoughts. I'm going to start with you, Emmy.
Okay, so I guess as a final thought, I will say that it's always multi-layered, right? And I always try to keep that in mind with people around me. And it's like, again, as angry as I get, which is a very human response to you know, again, that hurt that I feel. Plus, I'm pinning the blame on who deserves the blame, whether it was intentional or not. Because again, the road to hell was paved on good intentions. I'll still call a spade, right? And if you hurt me, you hurt me. While I do all of that, when I'm at work, I also know that I have to kind of keep like a whole different approach when it comes to like parents of trans kids, right? Where it's knowing that like parents of trans kids will always kind of come in and they're always kind of like fucking up left and right, which is completely and totally okay for them to do in my space, right? Because that's the space to fuck up in. And so I kind of wanted to go ahead and use that as like a segue to of course extend, much like Eli did, where I'm able to, within that particular space, right? Because I am protective of my energy outside of that, because I literally do nothing but that labor, right? Since we've renamed emotional labor to just labor, I do that for a living. I don't like to do that shit outside of work. So, but within that capacity, I am more than glad to see anybody to go ahead. And if you literally want to start throwing out all sorts of like stupid transphobic shit, like that might be a different conversation. Like, again, kind of like Eli was saying, like, are you willing to like meet me halfway so I can kind of like figure something out here or not? But yeah, that's I guess like my last little spiel on that as to like my own personal kind of approach as to like where I can go ahead and contribute. Of course, outside of that, I am always like an outspoken advocate for other trans folks. So I will definitely continue to do so.
All right, Julia, what do you have? What were your final thoughts for us?
I have really like no final thoughts. This was cool. This was fun. Thank you for letting me come on and talk. I guess, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I thought this was a pretty good conversation.
Are you good with me asking you to maybe in just a minute's time, take like 30 seconds to a minute, and share with me what you think is like a 2 or 3 step quick plan for anybody following along to be strategic in their efforts to support us as allies? What would you say as Julia? I know that it might be hard to kind of reduce that down into, but I want to give you this space, because I do love the way that your mind thinks and the way you've been sharing, what you talk about being strategic in our political activism and in how we're looking at just different intersections of identities. So just take a minute and share that. What would be your vision to see that actually come to fruition?
Yeah, so I guess my most important thing is like, I think that if someone wants to be like a really good ally, is to like first off understand that like this is a thing that is a lot larger than any one person. You know what I mean? Like we need allies who like are imperfect wherever they are and like have their own problems. Like if you're willing to fight with us or alongside us, like that's what's really important. And I think like but I think the really important turn of accepting like the imperfection of like just people in this country and where we're at right now is like it's part of a strategic goal. We don't accept like imperfection because it would be great if everyone had all the right opinions. We do it because we need a mass movement, like a mass movement. I think the second thing is to start thinking along those lines and keep your eye out for things that have the capacity to organize along large scale lines. Like there are political organizations in every city across this country there that people can participate in. There are protest groups, there are advocacy groups in every single city across this country. And whether that means like looking into like if you live in like New York City, where they have like the Working Families Party and the Democratic Socialist of America, and they have like every advocacy group for anything you could think of. Like there are ways to like vote and fight and express yourself, but also like organize more meaningfully. Like there are like groups that meet to discuss like Black Lives Matter in DC all the time. And in Washington, DC, where I live, there are groups that like do trans advocacy and trans work and are holding events constantly. So like, I guess keep your eye out for like things you can do in the world that are part of larger organizations, that are permanent organizations, not just one-off events, but organizations with a goal and an interest, and participate in that. Because if you have the strategic framework of like thinking of the bigger struggle, if you have a willingness to go out, maybe like whenever you've got some, like if you have free time on one weekend and you can go out to an event, or you can just like go talk to someone who is actually like an organizer, an activist, and learn more, or even participate in whatever it is you want to do, like whether that's like climate activism or something else. Like it's good to like go out in the world and actually do something physical. And I think the final thing is just like, there are so many options out there for like education and literature and people to listen to and like talk to. And I think like the final thing to like be like a good like ally is like once you like accept that it's like a strategic question, that this is a struggle, that it's a fight, once you accept that like we are all very small people in a very big struggle and we need to like have an organized force working on these different issues, then I think the final thing to do is just like maybe find out like what your role is going to be in that. What I always say is like there's one struggle on many fronts and there are going to be many roles. Some people want to be at like the front of like a parade marching with a megaphone. Some people are really just not into that. They're going to be at the back of the parade. They might not even be in line, but they're happy to donate or do something else. Or they're happy to maybe like go door to door getting people to sign on to something. Like there are a million different ways to contribute and fight. And we all don't need to be brave, big, strong people at the front of things. There's as much a need for people in the background as people at the front. And everything that you can do is like noble and good and just. And so like, I think that's a really important question is once you realize like it's a big struggle, we've got to think strategically. It's a big fight. what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to contribute? What skills or talents do you have? And what role can that play in the fight that we're having? That's what I think is like maybe a very like improvised like 3-step thing to think about like, how to do this better.
So, Julia, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, if they happen to be watching from the DC area and maybe, you know, connect with you and help advocate with you, is there a place where they can reach you? Is it just on Facebook or?
I literally just have an Instagram and
Okay.
like a Facebook, but I only use like my Instagram for anything like this.
Okay.
I'm just Jay Cheval. I can send you my Insta actually. But yeah, that's
at Jay Cheval.
Yeah,
Jay.
let me pull it up for you.
I can just post I just posted it there. Is that right?
Oh, sorry, Julia _Cheval. Sorry.
See how you are. See how you are.
My bad.
Well, now while I try to find that, let's see. Avalisa, why don't you give us your final thoughts?
I will. I'll do that for you. My phone just died as I was trying to follow Julia. My final thoughts on frankly speaking, April 2nd. I am so happy that we were able to do this. I'm so happy that we were able to come together and have a conversation from different lives and different perspectives. And I think this is absolutely beautiful. I mean, this conversation, as much as it does help other people, it also is a lot for us. And I really appreciate that I had, you know, everyone here, that both of you came, and Julia on such short notice, but that you guys came to have this conversation and just bounce ideas off of, because there are so many spaces where we cannot be frank. There are so many spaces where we can't talk openly, where we have to censor ourselves, where we have to worry about who we may or may not hurt with our words and how that's going to affect, you know, everything else and all of this other stuff. And sometimes there are things that I really want to say and things that I'm really passionate about. And it's like, only other trans people are going to understand this. And if I'm sitting in front of a camera by myself, like, am I really going to be able to get this across? But like with the support of everyone here, in this room, in this studio, it's so much easier to actually say the things that, you know, I want to say, like, fuck Pete Ricketts.
Pete I call him Prickets. That would be Prickets. Just the P Ricketts, Prickets. So yes, I would also like to say, you know, thank you so much for everyone that has that joined today. Emmy, love you so much. Julia, so great to meet you and hear about you today. I sent you a follow request on Instagram. And, you know, we can always circle back around another time if we need to bring the four of us back together again. But thank you so much. Thank you to all the folks who joined in, who followed along, who posted questions and comments. We just love it. Our next show, we are going to be airing our next show 2 weeks from today, April 16th at 6 p.m. I am going to shut those blinds so that you might I don't end up with stripes all over me halfway through the show. And but again, thank you so much. I enjoyed putting together the graphics and doing all that, because that's kind of my jam, and to run the background stuff that you don't get to see as I'm playing around and moving you each on the screen. And I'm just so grateful, because I do feel like we do need to have space where we can vent, we can say the things that we want to say. You know, we can maybe like get our dukes up and get ourselves going a little bit, but also help guide some folks along who are watching. And I know that there are quite a number of people who follow Speaking of Happy on Facebook. So thank you all so much. That is it. We are going to conclude show number 1, episode 1 of Frankly Speaking. We are getting ready to sign out. I'm just going to run our little graphic close here. Actually, it's not a close, it's the open, but I'm going to cap it off with that. I'm going to cap it off with that. Much love to y'all. Take care. Good night. Speaking of Happy presents Frankly Speaking, with co-hosts Eli Rigatuso, founder and queer transmasculine two-spirit of the Menominee Nation, and the lovely Avalisa Gallo, model, public speaker, makeup fanatic, and outspoken transgender advocate. Together, we are Frankly Speaking.